Yo, welcome back and thanks for tuning in. Today I am going to be discussing the two Premier League games we have on Friday, Norwich City, Southampton, followed by the big matchup between my beloved Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester United. Before I dive into these matches, I thought it would be fun to briefly touch on that Wednesday showdown we had for that 50K first prize, the Manchester City Arsenal game. And man, it was kind of a shit show. We had a bunch of injuries, a bunch of early substitutions. It was pouring rain the whole time. The play was sloppy, just a lot of unpredictability overall. And then, of course, the storyline really is that David Luiz, who's a terrible defender, makes tons of bad decisions, ends up having to sub on very early in the match, and is then directly responsible for the first two goals, including that Kevin De Bruyne penalty, in which Luiz earned himself a red card. The rest was history after that. Ultimately, the winning lineup had a Phil Foden substitute goal. No, that was not by mistake, in my opinion. I think it was a very sharp play. I put in some lineups with Aguero, Bernardo Silva, and Leroy Sané, even though I knew they weren't starting, just to get that potential leverage off the bench. And, of course, it was Phil Foden who we needed, someone I actually just overlooked. But props to the winning lineup there for having the cojones to put Foden in with both goalkeepers. And I think, that's certainly not going to happen all the time, but when we're thinking about these showdown slates tomorrow, for example, these teams haven't played for 3 months. The fitness of all these players is in question, so I think we should expect early substitutions, especially in a game that's like 0-0 heading into the 60th minute. I think you're going to see both teams want to start to bring on different attacking options and things like that. So yes, I do think that, in showdown, the substitutes are definitely in play, in some of these games, especially with them being the first match after a long layoff for these teams. But of course, that is a high risk, high leverage move that more often than not is definitely not going to pay off. But with that risk comes potential reward. So just something to think about as kind of a general point in attacking these showdown slates, particularly if you are going to be putting in a bunch of lineups, whether it's the 20 max or, whatever the max is. I think the later slate has like a 94 lineup entry max. All right, enough of that. Let's quickly talk about the odds on these matches. Norwich City, Southampton. Southampton, the favorite here by about, it's between 0.5 a goal, so about a quarter of a goal, plus 120, so they're not even, less than even money here. So pretty evenly matched. Southampton is the better team. Norwich City is a team that, for me, thrives a lot on their home crowd and atmosphere. And without that, I definitely think it's a disadvantage to them and kind of a boost to Southampton, even though they're on the road. And overall, while Southampton is the stronger side, it's been such a long layoff that I don't feel super confident in saying that, Southampton's definitely going to come out here and dominate this game. I think we'll see chances on both sides, stretches of the game where both teams possess the ball. So just something to think about in terms of roster construction there. I'm going to have to look closer at my projections, but, off the top of my head, like a 4-2 Southampton stack would probably be the way to go, but 3-3 could work just as well here, I think. And then the later match between Tottenham and United. Again, United favored by like a quarter of a goal right now. And Both teams plus money. Again, these are two teams that are, very similar in terms of the way they had performed prior to the break. Both teams were dealing with injuries at that time as well, and now they're both pretty much fully healthy. Kane, Son, Bergwijn, and Sissoko back for Tottenham. And then Rashford should be healthy for United. And Pogba apparently could even start here. I doubt that's going to happen because he's been out for a really long time. But you could see Paul Pogba come off the bench. So both teams at full strength here. I think it's really just a coin flip between these teams. And so for that reason, I don't think there is an optimal build necessarily. I think it's fine to go 4-2 either way or 3-3. 5-1 either way could even work out, depending on how this match plays out, because I don't think either team is going to have, a significant share of the possession. I think it'll be close to 50-50, and I think chances will go back and forth. It should be a fairly open game because I think they're so evenly matched that neither team is going to sit back too much. Of course, we're talking about Jose Mourinho managing Tottenham now, so they may play a little more defensive than I would like to see. But overall, I think that's a pretty evenly matched match there. All right. So let's go ahead and start with the Norwich Southampton game. I'm just going to kind of go through the expected lineups here and any news and notes. So, no real major injuries for Norwich City. I think probably one of the most important things to note is that Buendia was injured for a while, was out of the lineup. He was healthy towards the end of that layoff. I do expect he and Andre Duda to both start. And I think based on the last couple of matches, they were actually splitting corners and set pieces. So, I still think Buendia is going to be one of the top cash options just because of his consistency with the set pieces and with the open play crossing. He draws fouls. He creates chances. So he's a great cash play. But Duda, not bad either, especially with a role on set pieces. Pukki, Cantwell they're priced pretty reasonably, and these guys are more of the boomer bust. You're going to want a goal or an assist out of them, but both are perfectly capable of that. And then Teddy and McLean are going to be the deeper lying guys. Some floor from defensive action, but not a ton of upside unless they pop up with one of those rare goals, and McLean would be the guy that I would look for that. He should play a bit higher than Tete. Then in the back, Max Aaron's a really talented player that I feel like was kind of restricted by the coaching staff in terms of not letting him get forward as much as he might like to, but that started to change towards the latter part of the season before play was stopped. He was getting forward more. He was crossing more. So he's a nice option. And then Lewis sometimes plays center back, but he should be moved out to a fullback position here. So not a bad play depending on his price, which I've not looked at. All right, Southampton side, mostly healthy, although Shane Long is probably going to miss this match, and Gineppo is going to miss as well because he's on a yellow card ban. So that probably means that Obafemi is going to start up top with Danny Ings. If we're looking at the showdown pricing, Obafemi is like way overpriced. Sure, he could pop up with a goal, but I think he's far less than optimal at his price. And then as far as set pieces for Southampton, Ward-Prowse was actually splitting with Bertrand. It looks like Ward-Prowse was taking one side and Bertrand was taking the other. Probably Bertrand over here on left-sided and Ward-Prowse on right-sided corners. So Ward-Prowse is a great floor play. He's going to be, like him and Buendia, if you're playing the showdown, will probably be two of the first guys that you want to slot in there. But I love Bertrand at his price, given his consistency. Ings is like your boomer bust forward. You need a goal out of him for him to pay off. In terms of upside at a lower price, Armstrong and Redmond are both interesting options. And then Højbjerg actually has a decent floor, especially for his price. And he's more than willing to get forward and shoot from deep when the opportunities present themselves. Jan Valeri is an interesting player. He's been pretty awesome for DFS, but he just wasn't getting playing time. But if he's in there, definitely a decent option if he's at a reasonable price as well. Here, let me just take a look. Oh, this is the wrong slate. Let me just pull up that one. Of course, it's hidden. All right. So where is Valeri? Yeah, 4,400, not bad. So someone you could definitely consider there. Also, just briefly pull up my projections on both teams. So, Buendia the highest, no surprise there. But Duda not far behind. There's Pukki with the low floor, but he has that goal upside. Cantwell, kind of a similar projection there. Kenny McLean, he's popping pretty well there, especially at his price of 5,200. There's Max Aarons right behind him. I think it's probably close between the two of them. And those are, the main guys would be looking at from Norwich. Moving down to Southampton. Yeah, JWP. Great projection. Although I might have to adjust that down just a little because it's probably factoring in some games where he was taking all of the set pieces over Ryan Bertrand. But you get a 3K plus discount on Bertrand, and his floor is only about 3 points behind. So a really nice value there. Shane Long, like I said, would probably be out. There's Redmond and Armstrong kind of projected similarly, and you really do need a goal or assist out of either of them. So Sofiane Bafal is a guy that I might be interested in rostering, even though I don't expect him to start, because he is a guy that could certainly come into the match around 60 minutes, and he's got a lot of ability on the ball. So I think if he's playing against some tired legs, that's a guy that could take advantage of it. So just an interesting point there, especially because he's only at 4,800. All right, let's talk about Manchester United and Spurs now. As far as the predicted lineup here, I think this is pretty accurate. Lo Celso has been struggling with fitness. I think there's a chance he starts, and he's priced pretty low on the showdown slate. But I find it more likely that he's going to come off the bench, probably at the expense of someone like Ndombele, who just can't seem to go full 90 minutes, has just struggled with fitness. So that's something to keep in mind. I do think Kane and Son will both start here. They should be fully healthy. Even though Kane hasn't played in quite a long time, I think Mourinho will probably let him go 90. Son and Bergwijn would be the two guys that I think are a little bit more likely to be subbed off early, maybe for like Eric Lamela. Dele Alli is suspended for this game, so he will not be available. As As far as set pieces for Spurs, if this is the lineup and Lo Celso is out, I think we're probably going to see Son take most set pieces, which is a really nice bump for him. But if Lo Celso is on, he should have all of them. If we see Eric Lamela without Lo Celso, then I think Lamela takes over Son. So there's just kind of a hierarchy to think about there. It is possible that Ndombele takes a few, but it would probably only be one or two, so not enough to get me super excited. And then you can take a look at the projections for Tottenham. Kane's the highest at 10-7. Manchester United has been a pretty solid defense, especially in terms of limiting their opponent's fantasy points. So I don't think you're going to see a ton of peripheral accumulation from Spurs players. It's going to be more about picking out, who ends up with that goal or assist. So it's more upside plays in that sense. Serge Aurier, 6,600 projects very well. But he always scares me a little bit because he's prone to yellow cards and even red cards. So just a little bit of risk with him. As I mentioned, if Lo Celso does start at 5,800, I'd be willing to take that even if I only think he's going to get like 70 minutes there. And Ndombele is really cheap too. He's a very talented player, very capable of picking out somebody for an assist, like picking out Kane. So I definitely want some exposure to him. All right, that basically covers Spurs. Let's get to Manchester United. And again, I think this is probably a pretty accurate look at what we're going to see out of United. I know there's talk that Pogba is going to be available here, but I do not think he starts. But again, he's only at 6,800. Although he is a deeper lying player, we know he loves to shoot. So that is an interesting one to look at in Showdown coming off the bench for sure. I think you could say the same for Mason Greenwood, although he's probably priced up a little bit too high for that. Now that Bruno Fernandes is here, he pretty much has a lock in all corners and set pieces. I think the penalty situation is pretty interesting for Man United. And look, penalties don't happen that often, but it was funny because before that Manchester City game, I specifically wrote about David Luiz and how prone he is to, conceding penalties. And actually, Serge Aurier is right behind Luiz in terms of red cards. Or penalties conceded, rather. So I don't think it's the craziest thing that we might see a Manchester United penalty, as much as it hurts to say that as a Spurs fan. Really, the Tottenham defense before Mourinho got there and even after he got there just could not keep a clean sheet to save their lives. Maybe they've worked those kinks out with more time under Mourinho now, but then again, they were in lockdown this whole time, so who knows? So I do not have a lot of confidence in Tottenham keeping a clean sheet. Maybe that's my subjective bias there, but I think the stats kind of back that up actually. So with all that being said, I don't think we can confidently say who's going to take PKs. Pogba was taking them, then he got hurt. Like last season, he took them all. Then Rashford started taking, but then Rashford got hurt, and then Fernandes showed up, and he was taking. So in the likely scenario that we have Fernandes and Rashford on the field, someone might tell you who they think is going to take it, but I think it's a 50-50 proposition. But either of those guys have a little extra equity just on the chance that they do take a PK. So, yeah, Fernandes has a projection about 7.5 points higher than any Spurs player. So he's probably going to be your best cash optimal option there. Rashford and Martial a little bit below him. Two upside guys. Rashford, of course, does have a decent floor too from fouls drawn. He will cross an open play. So kind of a nice combo there at a little discount to Fernandes. And then there's Pogba at 6,800, but don't expect that he's going to start. Again, one thing I probably need to adjust here is Fred's projections. Probably a bit high because he was taking a lot of corners for a while there before Fernandes got there. That is going to change. Daniel James, do not expect him to start, but 5K are a really nice price if he does. And again, not the worst idea to look at him coming off the bench in this game. The fullbacks are going to be in play here, Mata and Wan-Bissaka, although Aurier does project higher than both of them. All right, so that covers both games. I think that in looking at these matches, both of them could go either way, and especially with this layoff, it's hard to predict. So it's not like that prior City slate when we could just kind of stack City 5-1 or 4-2 as many ways as possible. I think we're going to have to be a little more creative here, and there's going to be a lot more variance at play just because these are closer matchups. So, if you're playing in the big tournaments, I think it's worthwhile to get creative with these builds and try to move off the chalk. Because, again, it's the first game back here. Expect a lot of substitutions. Expect some guys to start that, didn't show up in the predicted lineups that I just went over. And I think if the Arsenal City game showed us anything, it was that, we think we have some idea of who's going to start, but really only the coaches know, and we don't have any idea about the fitness of these guys or who's looked good in training and what they worked on in training and all that stuff. So just a lot of unpredictability here. So I think it's something to embrace. The predicted lineup and the predicted chalk, may not get it done. And so I think there is some merit to trying to move off that in tournaments. Of course, in cash, you want to stick to the safer, the optimal plays for sure. All right, if you are still with me, thanks for tuning in and watching. Again, if you are interested in soccer content moving forward, I'm going to be putting out a lot of it. So please hit the subscribe button. And thank you to everyone that has subscribed thus far. And for all of you that have sent me messages as well, commenting on the content. That means a lot, and I do appreciate it. All right, guys, good luck out there, and I will see you next time.